Commander Vera stood in the repair bay of Outpost 7, trying not to breathe too deeply. The place reeked of burnt coolant and engine grease. Her scaled skin rippled in disgust as she looked around at the cramped, dirty workspace. Oil stains covered the floor. Half-broken ship parts lay scattered everywhere. The overhead lights flickered constantly, casting weird shadows on the metal walls. This was rock bottom. This was her punishment. 6 months ago, she had been a decorated pilot in the Imperial fleet. She had flown the best ships, commanded respect, and had a future bright enough to blind anyone who looked at it. Then came that battle near the Epsilon Nebula. She had saved her entire squadron by charging directly into enemy fire, destroying 3 hostile ships before they could launch their planet-killer missiles. Her superiors called it reckless. Called it a violation of protocol. Called it heroics that endangered Imperial property, meaning her ship and her dragon. So here she was. Outpost 7. The absolute middle of nowhere. A forgotten station on the edge of mapped space where broken ships came to die and careers came to end quietly. And the only mechanic who could fix her damaged ship was human. Tom walked toward her, wiping his hands on an old rag. He was built like a loading dock worker. Thick shoulders, strong arms, a slight belly that suggested he enjoyed his meals. His hair was turning gray at the temples, and his face had the kind of lines that came from years of squinting at engine parts. He moved slowly, carefully, like someone who knew that rushing only caused mistakes. "Commander," he said in that flat, unremarkable accent humans had. "About payment for your ship repairs. The plasma drive replacement parts weren't cheap, and the hull welding alone took me 40 hours. Vera felt her triple-jointed fingers curl into fists. She knew exactly how much she owed. The number made her want to scream. Her military account was frozen pending her disciplinary review. Her personal credits were running dry. Behind her, inside a battered medical pod, lay Shoal. Her dragon. Her partner. Her weapon. Shoal had been magnificent once. His crystalline scales had shimmered with inner light, reflecting stars like a living mirror. His wings had stretched 20 meters when fully extended, each membrane glowing with bioluminescent patterns that could hypnotize prey or blind enemies. The neural interface implanted at the base of his skull had connected their minds in battle, making them move as one lethal unit. Now those scales were cracked and dull like dirty glass. His wings hung in tatters, shredded by plasma fire during their last engagement. The neural interface had been severed when a missile fragment had torn through his skull plating. He lay motionless in the pod, breathing shallowly, his eyes glazed with constant pain. The Imperial medical teams had examined him for 2 days before delivering their verdict. Unsalvageable. The damage was too extensive. The cost to repair him would exceed the cost of breeding and training a new dragon. Their recommendation was immediate euthanasia. But even killing him properly cost money. The disposal of a military dragon required special permits, certified facilities, environmental clearances. The paperwork alone would take weeks. The fees would drain what little credits Vera had left. She had been trying to figure out what to do about Shoal for 3 days now. She couldn't afford to save him. Couldn't afford to kill him properly. Couldn't even afford to transport him back to Imperial space. Then she looked at Tom and an idea sparked in her mind. A cruel, perfect idea. Her mandibles clicked together in what her species considered a smile. "Human," she said, pulling up her data pad. Her clawed fingers moved quickly across the holographic interface. "I'm transferring ownership of my dragon to you. Consider it payment for the repairs." Tom stopped wiping his hands. He blinked at her. "You're what?" "The creature in the medical pod behind me. His name is Shoal. He's yours now." Vera completed the legal transfer with a few quick touches. The station's computer registered the change immediately. Ownership of 1 combat dragon, transferred from Commander Vera to Thomas Mitchell, human civilian. Do with him whatever you want. Sell his parts. Keep him as a pet. I don't care. From across the bay, 3 of her fellow officers who had been watching the whole thing burst into laughter. They got the joke immediately. Lieutenant Krex actually slapped his knee, his barking laugh echoing off the metal walls. Captain Eula covered her mouth with her hand, her shoulders shaking. They all understood. Vera had just dumped a dying, worthless animal on this primitive human who probably didn't even know what a combat dragon was. The thing would be dead within 3 days, maybe 4 at most. Then Tom would be stuck with a massive corpse and all the legal problems that came with disposing of a military-grade bioweapon without proper authorization. It was petty. It was mean. It was absolutely perfect revenge for being stuck in this miserable station fixing her expensive ship. "Commander, I don't understand," Tom started to say, confusion written all over his plain human face. The transaction is complete, human. Vera's voice dripped with satisfaction. Enjoy your new pet. Consider us even. She turned sharply on her heel and walked toward the exit. Her officers fell into step behind her, still chuckling and making jokes in their own language. Something about stupid humans and their soft hearts. Something about how long the corpse would start to smell. Behind her, she heard Tom's heavy work boots moving across the floor toward the medical pod. She never looked back. Why bother? The joke was already done. By tomorrow, everyone on the station would know about it. By next week it would be a story people told in the mess hall. The time Commander Vera stuck a dumb human with a dead dragon. As the bay doors hissed shut behind her, Tom knelt down beside the medical pod. He pressed his rough, calloused hand flat against the transparent surface. Inside, Schulzei rolled toward him, focusing for just a moment. "Hey there, big guy," Tom whispered, his voice soft and gentle. "Looks like you've had a real rough time. Let's see what we can do about this, okay? You just hang in there." The dragon's eye closed again, too tired to stay open. But somewhere in his pain-filled mind, something registered. A kind voice. A gentle touch. Something different from the cold efficiency of military handlers. Tom pulled up a stool and sat down, already pulling out his data pad to start researching dragon biology. He had work to do. 3 days passed. 3 long days where Vera tried to forget about the dragon and focus on getting off this miserable station. She spent her time filing reports, arguing with Imperial Command about her reassignment, and avoiding her fellow officers who kept making jokes about her generous gift to the human. On the 4th morning she decided to check on her ship. Tom had promised the repairs would take a week, and she wanted to make sure he was actually working on it and not wasting time with that dead dragon. She walked through the station corridors, past the mess hall where morning shift workers grabbed their breakfast, past the observation deck where traders checked the daily shipping schedules. The repair bay was at the far end of the station, isolated from everything else because of the noise and fumes. When the bay doors opened, Vera froze. She couldn't process what she was seeing. The repair bay looked like a medical facility had exploded inside it. Equipment was everywhere, cables running across the floor like mechanical vines. Ship parts that should have been used for her repairs were instead hooked up to Schul's medical pod. A diagnostic screen as tall as Vera displayed scrolling bio readings in green and blue light. Another screen showed what looked like brain scan patterns. A makeshift life support system hummed quietly in the corner, its oxygen scrubbers working overtime. And in the middle of this chaos, Tom sat at a workbench surrounded by data pads and empty coffee cups. His hair stuck up in every direction. His eyes were red and puffy. His hands trembled slightly as he worked on some kind of circuit board. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. Because he hadn't. "What have you done?" Vera's voice came out sharper than she intended. Tom's fingers didn't stop moving on the circuit board. He didn't even look up. Stabilized him. "That's not possible. Took me 48 hours straight, but his pain indicators are down 60%. Blood oxygen is stable. Neural activity is increasing." Tom's voice was flat with exhaustion but completely steady. "He's going to make it." Vera felt her legs move forward without her permission. She approached the medical pod, her eyes scanning the readouts she'd seen 1,000 times on military medical displays. Heart rate steady. Breathing normal. Brain activity showing awareness patterns instead of the chaos of constant pain. Imperial specialists said he was unsalvageable, Vera said, but her voice had lost its sharp edge. They said it was impossible. Imperial specialists gave up. Tom finally looked up from his work. His bloodshot eyes met hers, and Vera felt something uncomfortable twist in her chest. There was no anger in those eyes. No accusation. Just tired determination and something else she couldn't identify. "I didn't give up." Vera moved closer to the pod. Inside, Schul's massive form lay still, but it was a different kind of stillness. Not the frozen rigidity of dying. Not the shallow breathing of someone waiting for death. His chest rose and fell in deep, steady rhythms. And his eyes, those huge, faceted eyes that had been glazed and unfocused with agony 3 days ago, were now clear. Alert. Tracking movement. Watching her. "You're just prolonging his suffering," Vera snapped, but the words sounded hollow even to her own ears. "This is cruelty. You're keeping him alive just to." "This is hope, Commander." Tom stood up slowly, his joints popping from sitting too long. He walked over to a holographic display and pulled up genetic sequencing data. "I spent the first 12 hours just researching dragon biology. Your people modified these creatures for war, didn't you?" I can see it right here in the genetic code. Vera stared at the floating display. Strands of DNA rotated slowly, certain sections highlighted in red. Enhanced aggression genes, Tom pointed at one section. Increased pain tolerance. Faster muscle development. And this, he highlighted another section. Reduced regenerative capability. You made them heal slower so they'd be dependent on imperial medicine. So they'd never survive without your support. That's classified information, Vera said weakly. It's in your station database. Not my fault your security is terrible. Tom zoomed in on another section of the genetic display. But here's the thing. The original regeneration genes are still there. You didn't remove them. You just turned them off. Dormant but not gone. Vera felt cold. You can't possibly activate dormant genetic sequences with a neural stimulator I built from mining equipment? Tom smiled, but it wasn't a happy smile. It was the smile of someone who'd just proven everyone wrong. Already did. 43 hours ago. His cells are already beginning to regenerate. Slow, but it's happening. He walked back to his workbench and picked up another data pad. I also contacted a veterinary hospital on Earth last night. Sent them all of Shul's medical data. Veterinary? Vera's translator Chip struggled with the unfamiliar word. Animal doctors. Medical specialists who work with creatures, not people. Tom pulled up a response message on the data pad. On Earth, we have doctors who spend their entire careers saving animals that everyone else has given up on. Endangered species. Injured wildlife. Pets that other vets say can't be saved. These doctors look at impossible cases and find ways to make them possible. He showed her the message. It was from someone named Dr. Patricia Chin at the San Diego Veterinary Research Center. The message was full of medical terminology and suggestions for treatment protocols. They're helping me, Tom said simply. They've dealt with nerve damage in dolphins. Bone regeneration in elephants. One doctor even helped a paralyzed eagle learn to fly again using prosthetics. He walked to the pod and placed his hand flat against it, that same gentle gesture Vera had seen 3 days ago. I'm not trying to make Shul combat ready, Commander. I don't care about his military value. I'm trying to give him a life worth living. A real life. Not as a weapon. As himself. Vera felt something crack inside her chest. An emotion she couldn't name. It felt like anger but burned like shame. It felt like confusion but cut like guilt. The creature is legally mine now, Tom said, his voice quiet but absolutely firm. You transferred ownership. The station computer has the records. You have no say in this matter anymore. He turned back to his workbench and picked up the circuit board again, dismissing her without another word. Vera stood there for a long moment, staring at the pod. At the medical equipment. At the exhausted human who'd worked for 48 hours straight to save a creature she'd thrown away as garbage. She turned and walked out without saying anything. The bay doors closed behind her with a hiss. But as she walked down the corridor, she couldn't shake what she'd seen. Shul's eyes. Clear and aware. Tracking movements. Present in a way they hadn't been in months. Maybe in years. What had this human awakened? And why did it terrify her so much? 2 weeks passed and Vera tried her best to pretend Tom and Shul didn't exist. But the rumors made that impossible. They started small. Whispers in the mess hall. Quiet conversations that stopped when Vera walked past. Then they grew louder. More frequent. More impossible to ignore. The human mechanic had performed a miracle. That's what people were saying. A Thrixian merchant captain named Krell had brought his cargo-loading robot to Tom. The machine had been declared completely dead by 3 separate Thrixian repair specialists. They'd told Krell to scrap it for parts and buy a new one. But Krell was poor, and new robots cost a fortune, so he'd asked the human to look at it. Just to see. Tom fixed it in 6 hours. 6 hours. A problem that expert technicians had given up on. The robot was now working better than it had in years, and Krell was telling everyone who would listen about the crazy human who could fix anything. Then there was the Jelith pilot. His name was Vorn and Vera knew his story. He'd been discharged from military service for emotional instability. In Jelith culture that was a mark of permanent shame. He'd been wandering the station for months, drunk most days, barely functional. Other Jelith avoided him like he carried a disease. Now Vorn worked in Tom's repair bay. Vera had seen him 3 days ago, carrying equipment and laughing at something Tom had said. Laughing. Like he was a normal person with a normal life. Her fellow officers found all of this hilarious. Hey Vera, Lieutenant Kreck said one morning in the command center. How's that worthless dragon you gave away? Oh wait, I heard he's becoming a station legend. My mistake. Captain Eula didn't even try to hide her amusement. I heard a trader offered Tom 15,000 credits for the dragon yesterday. 15,000. For something you threw away like garbage. The jokes came daily. Hourly. Every time Vera entered a room, she could feel the mocking stares. The barely concealed laughter. They all knew she'd made a fool of herself, and they were never going to let her forget it. Finally, after 2 weeks of torture, Vera's pride cracked completely. She had to see for herself. Had to know what Tom had actually accomplished. Had to understand why everyone was talking about her dragon like it was some kind of miracle. She walked to the repair bay on a Tuesday afternoon, when the station was quiet between shifts. Her heart pounded in her chest. Her hands felt cold. She didn't know what she was going to see, but part of her was terrified it would be exactly what everyone was saying. The bay doors opened. Vera's breath stopped in her throat. She was walking. Not stumbling. Not dragging himself. Walking. Moving across the repair bay floor with steady, purposeful steps. His massive body was supported by some kind of mechanical frame, an exoskeleton made of metal struts and composite materials that wrapped around his legs and torso. But it wasn't crude. It wasn't clumsy. The frame moved with him, integrated so seamlessly with his body that it looked almost natural. And his scales. His crystalline scales that had been cracked and dull and lifeless 3 weeks ago. They were glowing. Actually glowing with inner light. But not the standard blue-white that military dragons showed. These were colors Vera had never seen on a combat dragon. Deep purples that shifted to violet in the light. Rich golds that sparkled like precious metal. Emerald greens that pulsed with each breath. She'll look beautiful. Wild. Free. Prosthetic engineering, Tom said from somewhere to her left. Vera jerked her head around. Tom was standing at his workbench holding some kind of tool, looking at her with calm eyes. We use it on Earth for injured animals and people. The frame supports his weight while his tissue regenerates. Takes the pressure off his damaged bones and joints so they can heal properly. In another month, maybe 6 weeks, he probably won't need it anymore. Vera tried to speak but couldn't find words. Tom set down his tool and walked toward Shul. The dragon's massive head swiveled to track him, and Vera saw something that made her chest hurt. The bond. Shul looked at Tom with complete devotion. His huge eyes followed every movement the human made. When Tom got close, Shul made soft chirping sounds, gentle noises that Vera had never heard a military dragon make. Tom reached up and scratched behind the ridge where Shul's skull met his neck, and the dragon leaned into the touch like a massive pet. Like he trusted Tom completely. Like Tom was his entire world. You treat it like a person, Vera whispered. Because he is one. Tom's voice was gentle but firm. He kept scratching Shul's scales, and the dragon's eyes half closed in contentment. Vera, your military conditioning suppressed his intelligence. All those implants and training protocols. They weren't just teaching him to fight. They were actively holding back his natural mind. Tom stepped back and looked at Shul with something Vera recognized as affection. Real, genuine affection. The neural damage you thought was catastrophic? It actually freed him. When that missile fragment severed his neural interface, it broke the control implants. Shul's been sentient this whole time. Where? Thinking. Feeling. You just never let him show it. Shul's head turned toward Vera. His enormous eyes locked onto hers, and Vera felt something break inside her chest. She'd looked into those eyes 1,000 times. During training. Before battles. After victories. But she'd never actually seen him. Never seen the person behind the weapon. Now she did. Recognition. He knew who she was. Memory. He remembered everything they'd been through together. And something else that made Vera want to cry. Forgiveness. He doesn't blame you, Tom said softly, watching her face. I asked him about it. About you. About the military. He doesn't blame you. You asked him? Vera's voice cracked. We communicate. Not perfectly yet. We're still learning each other's signals. But yeah, we talk. Tom smiled. He wants you to know that he understands. You were following your culture's rules. Doing what you were taught to do. He doesn't hold it against you. But he's choosing his own path now. His own life. Before Vera could respond, an alarm screamed through the station. The emergency alert system crackled to life with the harsh voice of the station commander. All personnel combat alert. Hostile vessels detected on approach vector. Krell Warpack 12 ships. This is not a drill. All combat personnel to stations. Civilians to shelters. We are under attack. Vera's blood turned to ice. Krell raiders. The most vicious pirates in this sector. They didn't just rob stations. They enslaved populations. took prisoners to sell on black markets, burned everything they couldn't carry. And Outpost 7 had almost no defenses. No military ships. No combat dragons. No. She looked at Shul. Then at Tom. No, she said, shaking her head. You can't possibly be thinking. But Tom was already moving. He grabbed a flight suit from a wall locker and started pulling it on. He moved fast but calm, like someone who'd done this before. He looked at Shul and his voice carried a question. Not a command. Not an order. A request from one equal to another. Want to help them, buddy? Shul's response was a roar that shook the entire repair bay. Metal tools rattled on workbenches. The floor vibrated under Vera's feet. It was a sound of rage and challenge and protective fury. The dragon spread his healing wings and roared again. They were going to fight. The first explosion shook Outpost 7 so hard that Vera nearly fell as she ran down the corridor toward the hangar. Red emergency lights flashed. The alarm kept screaming. People ran in every direction, some toward shelters, others toward their combat stations. Vera's fighter was in Bay 3. The ship was still damaged from her last battle, but it could fly. It could fight. It might be enough to buy the civilians time to evacuate. She knew the truth though. 12 Krell warships against one broken fighter and the station's weak defense grid. This was a massacre waiting to happen. But at least she'd die like a warrior. At least her death would have meaning. She strapped into her cockpit and powered up the engines. The control panel lit up with warning indicators. Hull integrity at 60%. One weapon system completely offline. Shield generator running at half power. It was a death trap. She launched anyway. Space outside the station was chaos. The Krell warships had formed an attack pattern, circling like predators. Their weapons tore into the station's shields with relentless precision. Each hit sent ripples of energy across the protective barrier. The shields were weakening. Another few minutes and they'd collapse completely. Vera armed her remaining weapons and prepared to charge. Then something impossible shot past her cockpit. A blur of purple and gold light, moving so fast her sensors barely registered it. Vera's breath caught as she recognized the shape. Shul. But not the Shul she remembered. This creature had wing extensions that glowed with bright blue power, technology somehow fused with biology. The mechanical exoskeleton she'd seen in the bay had transformed into something else entirely. A flight system that made him faster and more agile than any natural dragon. He moved through space like a comet, like a force of nature, leaving a trail of shimmering light behind him. Outpost 7, this is Tom. Shul and I are engaging the raiders. Tom's voice came through her comm system, calm and steady like he was discussing repair schedules instead of flying into a battle that should kill him. Defense grid, coordinate fire on targets we mark. We'll draw them into your firing solutions. Before anyone could respond, Shul dove toward the nearest Krell assault ship. The dragon's mouth opened and plasma fire erupted from his throat. But this wasn't normal dragon breath. The blast was amplified somehow, concentrated into a beam so intense it glowed white-hot. It struck the Krell ship's hull and tore straight through, punching a hole 3 meters wide through armor plating that should have been nearly indestructible. The ship exploded in a ball of fire and debris. Vera's jaw dropped. How is that possible? But Shul wasn't done. The dragon banked hard, moving in ways that defied everything Vera knew about flight dynamics. He used a nearby asteroid for cover, disappeared behind it for just a second, then emerged from a completely different angle. 2 Krell ships fired at where they thought he'd be, but he was already somewhere else, circling around behind them. He wasn't following standard attack patterns. Wasn't using the rigid formations military dragons were trained to use. He was improvising. Thinking. Creating strategies on the fly. Neural link, Tom's voice explained like this was the most normal thing in the world. Not for control. For communication. Shul decides the moves. I just help with targeting data and watch his 6. Another Krell ship exploded. Then another. The station's defense grid came online, adding its firepower to the battle. But they weren't the only ones joining the fight. A small cargo ship accelerated out of the station hangar. Vera recognized it immediately. That was the Thrixian trader's vessel. But it wasn't running away. Mounted on its hull were improvised weapons, crude but effective. The ship opened fire on a Krell raider, and Vera saw the Thrixian repair bot at the controls, moving with mechanical precision. Then came a mining ship, piloted by someone Vera recognized. The Jelith pilot who'd been a drunk and a disgrace 2 weeks ago. He flew straight at a Krell warship, dodging defensive fire with skill that proved he'd never actually lost his abilities. He'd just lost his hope. Now he had it back. More ships joined. A medical transport with a Kelton doctor at the helm, using the ship's tractor beam to throw asteroids at enemy vessels. A maintenance worker in a construction mech, wielding a plasma cutter like a sword. Misfits. Outcasts. People the galaxy had thrown away. Tom had helped every single one of them. Fixed their machines. Healed their injuries. Given them purpose when they had none. And now they were fighting like a real military unit, protecting their home with everything they had. The Krell Warpack had come expecting an easy target. Instead, they'd found a coordinated defense that hit them from every angle. One of the Krell command ships broke formation, trying to retreat. Shul didn't let it. The Dragon executed a barrel roll that should have been impossible, came up behind the fleeing ship, and unleashed another amplified plasma blast that crippled its engines. The remaining Krell ships scattered. Their formation collapsed. They were retreating, running from a fight they'd been certain they would win. Vera watched in complete silence as Shul performed a victory roll through space, his bioluminescent wings blazing with colors that looked like celebration. Like joy. She'd never seen a military dragon do that. Had never imagined they could feel joy. Then her console lit up with new contacts. Multiple ships dropping out of faster-than-light travel. Big ships. Military-grade vessels. Her blood turned cold when she saw the identification codes. Imperial command ships. A full battle group. At least 20 warships, led by a massive dreadnought that could destroy the entire station with a single salvo. All vessels stand down immediately. A woman's voice came through on the emergency command channel. Cold. Authoritative. Absolutely certain of her power. This is Imperial Inquisitor Beth aboard the warship Dominion. We are here for the dragon-designated Shul. All other matters are secondary. Surrender the creature immediately or face Imperial consequences. Vera felt her heart sink into her stomach. The Empire had heard about Shul. About what Tom had done. They wanted the dragon back. They wanted to study him. Dissect him. Figure out how a primitive human had accomplished what their best scientists couldn't. And they wanted Tom. To interrogate him. To pull apart his brain and understand his methods. Even if it killed him. Tom's voice came through the comm one more time. Still calm. Still steady. Shul, think we should talk to them? The dragon's answering chirp sounded almost amused. Like this was just another problem to solve. Vera closed her eyes. Tom had saved them all today. And now the Empire was going to destroy him for it. The tribunal chamber buzzed with tension as Inquisitor Beth stood tall and rigid, her gray eyes scanning the room like a predator sizing up prey. She was imposing, the kind of person whose very presence made others stand a little straighter, speak a little more carefully. Vera had faced enemy fire without flinching, but something about Beth's cold assessment made her stomach tighten. Let me be absolutely clear, Beth said, her voice cutting through the murmurs. This isn't just about one dragon. This is about the precedent it sets. She gestured to Tom. A human barely established in galactic society, claims to have rehabilitated a military asset deemed beyond repair by our best scientists. An asset we've spent centuries perfecting. Tom didn't back down. He stood with Shul at his side, and though he looked small compared to the dragon's massive form, there was something unshakable in his posture. With respect, Inquisitor, your scientists gave up. I didn't perfect anything. I just listened. Listened, Beth repeated, her tone dripping with skepticism. She turned to the assembled tribunal members, representatives from a dozen different species. We're supposed to believe this human possesses some unique insight our entire empire lacks? One of the scientists, a nervous-looking being with too many arms, raised a tentative appendage. The neural scans are unusual. The dragon's brain activity shows patterns we've never documented. Higher cognitive function. Self-awareness markers. It's as if. As if what? Beth interrupted. The scientist hesitated. As if it's thinking for itself. Making choices. The chamber erupted. Dragons as sentient beings wasn't just controversial, it was catastrophic for the Empire. Their entire military framework, their power structure across 3 systems, relied on dragons being sophisticated tools, not individuals with rights and autonomy. Beth held up a hand for silence. We'll continue reviewing the evidence. All of it. The footage played for hours. Vera watched herself from weeks ago, so certain in her cruelty, so convinced of her superiority. She saw Tom's first night with Shul, the human curled up on the cold bay floor because he wanted to be there if the dragon woke in distress. She saw him spending credits he didn't have on experimental treatments, cross-referencing databases from 50 different worlds, teaching himself alien physiology through sheer determination. In one clip, Tom sat beside Shul's pod at 3 in the morning talking softly. "I know you probably can't hear me, buddy, but I'm not giving up. Back on Earth, I worked with animals everyone said were lost causes. A tiger that wouldn't eat. A dolphin that had given up swimming. Everyone told me I was wasting my time, wasting resources." He touched the pod gently. "But they were wrong. Those animals just needed someone to see them as individuals, not problems to be solved. I think you're the same." Vera had to look away. She remembered laughing at Tom's dedication, calling him foolish, naive. Now his words hit differently. He hadn't been naive. He'd been right. On the final day, Beth called Tom to testify formally. "Explain your methods," she demanded. "What did you do that our scientists couldn't?" Tom thought for a moment. "Your scientists approached Shul as a broken machine. They looked at what wasn't working and tried to fix it with standard protocols. I approached him as a patient with trauma. Physical wounds heal differently than psychological ones. Your scans showed his body was functional, but nobody asked why he wouldn't eat, why he wouldn't fly, why he'd shut down. And your conclusion? He'd given up. Not because his body failed, but because his spirit did. He'd been treated as a weapon his whole life, punished for any hint of individual thought, rewarded only for obedience and violence. When his body started failing, part of him was relieved. It meant the fighting could stop." Beth's expression didn't change, but something flickered in her eyes. "You're claiming a dragon has emotional depth equivalent to higher species?" "I'm saying every being with a complex nervous system has emotional depth. Whether we acknowledge it or not." Tom activated the neural link he developed. "But you don't have to take my word for it. Ask him yourself." The chamber fell absolutely silent as Shul's thoughts flowed through the translator. His voice was deeper than expected, resonant and clear. The dragon spoke slowly, choosing words carefully like someone using a new language. "I remember my first flight," Shul said. "Not the training flights. Before that. When I was very young, before the conditioning. I remember feeling wind under my wings and thinking it was beautiful. Then they punished me for straying from formation. They punished me until I forgot beauty existed." Vera felt tears on her face. Around the chamber, others were similarly affected. This wasn't a weapon speaking. This was someone who'd been broken systematically, deliberately. Shul continued. "I was taught my purpose was destruction. My worth was measured in enemies eliminated, in fear inspired. When my body weakened, I felt relief. And shame for feeling relief. I wanted to stop existing because existing only meant causing pain. And now?" Beth asked quietly. "Now I choose." Thomas showed me that choice was possible. He treated my wounds, yes, but more importantly, he treated me as if my preferences mattered. Whether I wanted light or darkness. Silence or conversation. He asked permission before touching me. Such a small thing, but I'd never experienced it. The dragon's large eyes focused on Tom. He gave me back myself. Not the weapon the Empire created, but whoever I might have been before that. I'm still discovering who that is. Beth closed her eyes briefly. When she opened them, her expression had shifted subtly. This tribunal recognizes we're facing unprecedented circumstances. The implications of dragon sentience affect not just military operations, but the ethical foundations of our entire civilization. She looked directly at Tom. The Empire cannot afford to ignore potential innovations, regardless of their source. Outpost 7 is hereby designated an experimental rehabilitation zone. Thomas Mitchell will continue his work under Imperial observation. Additional resources will be allocated for research into dragon cognition and the application of human veterinary techniques to other species. It was political maneuvering, face-saving bureaucracy. But it was also an admission that mattered. Humans had something valuable to contribute to the galaxy. Not superior technology or overwhelming force, but a different perspective. A stubborn refusal to accept that anyone was beyond helping. After the tribunal ended, Vera found Tom alone in the observation deck. Shul was visible through the window, flying through space with a grace that still took her breath away. The dragon moved like joy personified, banking and spinning without any tactical purpose, simply for the pleasure of movement. "That never gets old," Tom said softly. "Watching someone discover freedom." Vera stood beside him. "I need to apologize. Really apologize, not the surface-level sorry I managed before. I treated Shul as garbage. Treated you as a joke. I was wrong about everything that mattered. You were working with the information you had. The perspective you'd been taught." Tom glanced at her. "The impressive part isn't that you were wrong. It's that you admitted it and changed. Most people can't do that. The Empire has protocols for everything, Vera said. Strict guidelines about what's possible, what's worthwhile, what's proper. Following those protocols almost let something irreplaceable die. I keep thinking about what we almost lost. But we didn't lose it. And now others might be saved because of what we learned. Tom smiled. I meant what I said earlier. I could use help. There are probably dozens, maybe hundreds of beings the galaxy has written off. Creatures considered too damaged, too dangerous, too difficult. With your military connections and my medical background, we could make a real difference. Vera watched Shell complete another joyful loop. The dragon had been dying weeks ago, hollow-eyed and broken. Now he was vibrant, alive in every sense. And Tom was right, this success shouldn't be singular. The techniques, the perspective, the stubborn compassion that had saved Shell could help countless others. The Empire will resist, she warned. Acknowledging that our methods were flawed, that we missed something this fundamental, it threatens too many established systems. Let them resist. We'll prove them wrong one patient at a time. Tom's expression was determined. That's what humans do best. We see problems everyone else considers solved and we find better answers. Not because we're smarter, but because we refuse to accept that good enough is actually good enough. Over the following weeks, word spread through the outpost and beyond. The human who'd rehabilitated a dying dragon. The commander who'd risked everything to support him. Scientists began requesting transfers to Outpost 7. Other species sent representatives, curious about these human methods that produced such dramatic results. Tom's repair bay transformed into something between a medical facility and a sanctuary. A Kryn pilot brought in her bonded creature, a symbiotic being whose depression was killing them both. A merchant delivered a cargo hold full of animals seized from illegal traders, all traumatized and aggressive. Each case was different, each required innovation and patience, but Tom approached them all with the same philosophy: see the individual, not the problem. And Vera found herself transformed too. She'd spent years climbing military ranks, proving her worth through efficiency and results. Now she discovered a different kind of satisfaction in watching broken beings heal, in seeing fear replaced with trust. She learned to move slowly around frightened creatures, to speak softly, to wait for permission rather than demanding compliance. You're good at this, Tom told her one evening as they monitored a recovering patient together. The careful observation, the strategic thinking. Military training translates better than you'd expect. I spent years learning to identify weaknesses and exploit them, Vera said. Turns out identifying wounds and healing them uses similar skills. Just different intentions. Exactly. The galaxy needs warriors, sure. But it also needs healers. People who refuse to give up on the wounded. Shell landed nearby, careful not to disturb their patient. The dragon had become Tom's assistant in many ways, his size and strength useful for handling larger beings, his newfound empathy helping him connect with other traumatized creatures. I've been thinking, Shell said through the translator. His speaking had improved dramatically, vocabulary expanding daily. About others like me. Military dragons still in service. They don't know choice is possible. They don't know they could be more than weapons. Tom and Vera exchanged glances. It was an enormous undertaking, potentially dangerous politically. But the dragon was right. If Shell could be rehabilitated, others could too. And they deserved that chance. One step at a time, Tom said gently. First we establish the methods work consistently. Document everything. Build a track record that's impossible to dismiss. Then we push for broader changes. How long? Shell asked. As long as it takes. Change doesn't happen overnight, especially when it threatens powerful institutions. But it does happen if people are stubborn enough to keep pushing. And that, Vera realized, was the real lesson humanity offered the galaxy. Not technological miracles or military might, but persistent, stubborn, unreasonable hope. The refusal to accept that anyone was beyond saving, that any problem was truly unsolvable, that good enough would ever be acceptable when better was possible. The galaxy was vast and ancient, filled with species who'd perfected efficiency and established firm boundaries about what was possible. Then humans arrived, ignoring those boundaries, questioning those efficiencies, and proving that sometimes the newest perspective sees clearest. As Vera watched Tom work, watched Shell soar, watched dozens of wounded beings slowly heal, she understood that humanity's real gift wasn't any single skill or technology. It was the conviction that every individual mattered, that every life had value, that giving up was never actually an option. That stubborn compassion would reshape the galaxy, one healed heart at a time. Retry.